Healed of Cancer, Journey to a Miracle, written by Janelle Price, narrated by Ashley Strand. Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Years Later. Why am I writing this now, decades later? Because several years ago, I had a growth appear under my right arm. Although alarmed, I was comforted when the ultrasound showed it had no signs of malignancy. As the months passed, it continued to grow despite my faithful use of a supplement recommended by my physician. The growth became so large that surgery was necessary. The surgeon did another ultrasound with the same results as earlier, no signs of malignancy. I asked him if he had noticed on the patient history form that I previously had a malignant melanoma skin cancer removed on the same arm. Despite that, he guaranteed me the growth was not malignant. My second guarantee. The surgery was no big deal, but the aftermath was. I have a history of reacting to meds, especially if they cross the brain barrier. There was a list of everything I have ever reacted to on my hospital bracelet, but I had never been exposed to morphine. The more morphine pumped into me, the stranger I felt, like I was traveling through space. From my perspective, the room was definitely moving. Oddly, although it did nothing to stop the pain, it affected me in another way. From far, far away, I heard an otherworldly voice ask, "What is your pain level from 1 to 10? I answered 7. The voice kept asking that question, and I kept giving the same answer because the pain did not diminish. Finally, despite my impaired condition, I had the good sense to say, "No more pain medicine, no more." Inside, I was crying out to God for help. Suddenly, I saw visitors standing around my bed. They were all dressed in white tunic-like garments over jeans. Sitting in a chair next to my head, dressed in the same kind of attire, was someone who looked like my deceased mother. These beings carried on quite supportive conversation with me. To this day, I can't remember a word of it. After a while, because I was very weak and tired of all the talk, I said to them, "You aren't real. You need to leave." They left, but soon came back and continued talking to me quietly, apparently with the double intent of keeping me sane and awake. My surgery was supposed to just be day surgery, but the head nurse was not going to let me go home unless I could walk. Despite dizziness, weakness, and disorientation, with my husband Raymond's help and that of the mysterious visitors, I was able to walk out of the hospital. Much later, I realized my white-clad visitors had been angels, and I felt bad for rebuking them for talking. I am sure angels are not usually that talkative, but I believe, in answer to my prayer and that of others interceding me, the angels were strengthening me so I could go home. Was that really my mother seated next to me? I wasn't sure. My theology didn't have an answer for that question. Christmas was approaching, and we were delighted to have our daughter Mary and her husband Sean with us for the holidays. Sean is a very handy man with many different skills. One day he sat looking into my kitchen, which was quite a few years old. He said, "I can put in a new kitchen for you while I'm here if you want." After making sure that that was how he wanted to spend his vacation, we agreed. What woman wouldn't want an updated kitchen? I was delighted. Mary was our shopping assistant and coordinator, and a neighbor loaned us the tools. Raymond helped where he could, and so it all came together. Despite my pain, it was one of the most memorable Christmases, topped only by the first Christmas we had with our oldest child, Scott, after years of barrenness. But that's a story for another time. Because it took a while to recover from the surgery, I didn't schedule the required follow-up visit with my doctor right away. What was the hurry, since I had been assured twice my growth was not cancer? Before I was ready, the doctor's receptionist called and asked that I come in. I still didn't think I had anything to worry about, but I was wrong. It was hard for the doctor to tell me, but the required lab test on the tissue he removed came back metastatic melanoma. For some, it is a death sentence, but I didn't know that then. I just knew it was serious. Much later, writing this article, I looked on the internet and found this statement on WebMD.com. Although in most cases metastasized melanoma can't be cured, treatments and support can help you live longer and better. Time passed, and one day while I was resting in bed, I heard a loud voice speak these words from behind me. "You will not die, but live, and you will declare the glory of God." I knew immediately that there was an angel in the room bringing this message, although I did not see anything. I learned later that those words are found in Psalms 118:17. The angel's words quieted my soul and brought faith to me and assurance that I would live. Chapter 3. More lumps. Lumps appeared 2 more times under my right arm in the same place as when I first learned I had melanoma. Surgery was necessary again. The second time I had surgery, I made sure I did not have morphine. Because of my past history of overreacting to prescription drugs, I asked for no pain meds except to be allowed to take 2 ibuprofen. Unlike the first surgery, I woke with no after effects except some manageable pain that soon felt better after I took the ibuprofen. A special journey. When the lumps reappeared for the 3rd time, Raymond and I were RVing in California on the West Coast. Bethel, California was our main destination because we heard the Christians in that city had declared it a no-cancer zone and were having great success in seeing those they prayed for healed of cancer. We were especially interested in Bethel Church since the pastor there is a repeat guest speaker at our home church. Also important were visits with family. On our way to Redding, we stopped in Los Angeles to visit our son Christopher, his wife Jenny, and their 4 children. Their friend Jennifer Pitts and her 2 children were present. Meeting Jennifer was important because she partnered with my daughter-in-law Jenny to pray for my healing. More on that later. After our arrival in Redding, Jennifer, her husband, and their 2 children arrived and stayed in the same RV park where we were already camped. We enjoyed visiting with them, and it was a blessing to see someone we knew at the church services. Not that people at Bethel weren't friendly, they definitely were, especially the students at Bethel's Supernatural School of Ministry. They were always ready to fellowship and pray for someone in need. I especially enjoyed the prayer house at Bethel. It was open 24 hours a day with soft worship music playing continually, creating a healing atmosphere. One special night, we attended a worship event there featuring hand drums and other percussion instruments. Added to this was the beautiful view through the wraparound windows of the prayer house. Bethel is a high point in the city of Redding, located between the Cascade Mountains and the Trinity Alps. The stunning snow-capped mountains can be seen from this special house. In addition to hanging out with the prayer house, we attended Bethel church services at every opportunity, and also took advantage of other activities such as Saturday Healing Room Ministry. We attended a couple of classes, and I had several sessions at their counseling center, which I found very helpful. I'm still in touch via Facebook with the counselor I saw there. She and I have also done sessions on Skype. Both Raymond and I attended a seniors breakfast meeting. At that time, we had been in Redding almost 3 weeks and had not had an opportunity to meet the pastor, Bill Johnson, because he was always surrounded by a crowd of people. At the senior breakfast, I noticed him alone, leaning against the back wall. I went over and introduced myself to him, telling him I was a member of Impact, a church he has often visited and preached in. I explained why we were in Redding and asked him to pray for me. He very graciously prayed a faith-filled prayer for me. Did it make a difference? Only God knows. Bill praying for me was a desire of my heart, and I'm glad that desire was fulfilled. There were many people who prayed for me and stood with me. I'm grateful for each one of them. While at Bethel, I saw this beautiful painting by Brianna Schulz that called to me to take a leap of faith, cast off darkness, and step into God's glory. I was able to purchase a print of the original painting. Brianna not only gave me permission to use it, but she also graciously provided me with the digital file to use as a cover illustration for this book. She has other paintings and can be reached at gardencarrot@gmail.com. This painting is so special to me on a personal level because the girl looks very much like I did at age 15 when I met 18-year-old Raymond Price. We married when I was 20 and he was 23. We now have been married 50 plus years, have 3 children, 3 bonus children by marriage, and 8 grandchildren. Chapter 4, A Happy Birthday. We arrived at Redding in early March 2011 and stayed 3 weeks, which meant on the calendar it was officially spring. However, it was still winter in Redding. I had never experienced such a cold and challenging winter. On Sunday in late March, as we left church, we had to step carefully through about 3 feet of what looked like tiny hail. It wasn't fine enough to be snow, so that's my best guess. Despite ice on the ground, I hoped to go north to Florence, Oregon to spend my March 27th birthday with my sister and her husband, Carolyn and Alan Creeker. But there was a weather advisory not to go north. Alan suggested I check the internet for traffic cameras on Interstate 5 North. When I did, I saw that the roads had been cleared and the traffic was moving, but ice and snow were piled up elsewhere. About that time, someone new pulled into the RV spot next to us. He lived in northern Oregon and had wintered in Phoenix. Our new neighbor was pulling out to go north the next morning, and he said he made the trip every year at this time. He was sure the roads were okay, so we headed out. Texans like to say that everything is bigger in Texas, but we had never seen anything like the wild, wide, rushing rivers of Oregon or the rugged coastline there. The small white structures on the point in the picture below belong to the Hecta Head Lighthouse. The first thing about this third stop on our western adventure was having a reunion with my sister. We spent a lot of time together, discussed many things that brought emotional healing to us both. Many people think emotional healing also brings physical healing. The second best thing about this stop on our western journey was seeing the Hecta Head Lighthouse sitting on the Pacific coastline. The worst thing was discovering that I once again had lumps under my bad news at home. My oncologist had approved our trip, but told me to be back by a certain date for more scans and blood tests. On our return home, I quickly had the test done. The results were very, very bad. The melanoma had spread through my body into my lungs, liver, and even into my bones. Raymond and I had gone over the options available for treatment for melanoma before, but now my doctor added something else. A new drug had just been released for the general public specific to melanoma, Yervoy. She had been selected to use it on a test group and was familiar with it, but the public release had just happened, and we didn't know if it would be covered by Medicare and our insurance. If not, the cost would be out of our reach. When I heard the bad news of the widespread melanoma in my body, especially after the encouraging atmosphere I had been in the West Coast with my family and friends at Bethel Church, I went through a rough time emotionally. I shed many tears and wrestled with God for several days, reminding him he said I would live and not die. And now, despite the promise, death was staring me in the face, a very painful death. At some point during my ordeal, I don't remember just when, I was on my back porch and spied this very special flower. It was shaped like a cross and reminded me of the promise God had made to me. Someone I respected who was concerned about my downward spiral told me that wrestling with God wasn't wise. I thought of Jacob in Genesis and continued to wrestle until I got my faith back. I realized that the dangerous place I was in didn't change what the angel told me, which was that I would live and not die. I determined to simply believe those words. Remember my visitor in the hospital who came with the angels and looked like my mother? I saw her again in a dream. At least, I think it was a dream. This time, I saw a picture in my mind of her in my living room. She, my daughter, and I were standing together in a living room as if in prayer. My daughter Mary, who lives some distance away, had been asking to come, but I felt so bad I was saying no to everyone who wanted to visit. For one thing, I didn't have the strength to make conversation, and more importantly, I didn't want any tearful goodbyes to weaken my faith in the word of healing that God had given me. But the dream picture with my mom and daughter changed my mind about my daughter coming. She did come and was a strength and a blessing to me. Raymond, unknown to me until after I was healed, searched for the internet about my condition and about the chemo my doctor offered. He was dismayed to read that the average benefit of Yervoy at the time was estimated to be only an additional 6 months of life. He didn't tell me that until I was healed, for which I am grateful. I understand Yervoy is still being used today in conjunction with another drug with better results. Yervoy works by revving up the immune system. I started the treatment as an outpatient and found it tolerable. It was administered as an infusion, utilizing an IV. The standard protocol at that time was 4 treatments, 1 every 3 weeks, with less frequent boosters after that. The treatment center was pleasant, with a multitude of big windows that let in natural light and allowed those of us receiving treatment to see outside. IVs were administered as we reclined in comfortable, padded lounge-type chairs. The nurses were kind and attentive. The patients were a diverse lot, as were the treatments. We often fellowshipped with each other and compared notes or shared about our families and our other lives, the ones we had before we became cancer patients. It was almost like we belonged to the same private club. Almost, but not quite. Magazines and books were available. At the back of the room were freebies that had been donated specifically for the cancer patients. Many boxes of new wigs of various colors and styles were in the back corner. At the front of the area was a hat rack with various styles of hats and scarves on it. Also available for the taking were some books, games, and other items that didn't interest me, so I've forgotten what they were. We could select whatever items met our needs. I understood that with Yervoy, I would not lose my hair, so I didn't expect to need the head covering items. My hair is a unique shade of red. Raymond has always loved it and said that that was what had attracted him to me. He was a dry wit, and after decades of happy marriage, I know there's more to our relationship than that, so I suspect he was teasing, but I still don't want to lose my hair. I wasn't sure I would feel like me without it, but I found when I began to lose my hair, I wasn't devastated after all. I was okay. I was still me. I looked at every wig in the treatment room, but didn't find one with the hair color like mine. So instead I covered my semi-baldness with sample hats like this one. Some of the female outpatients wore artfully arranged scarves to cover their increasing baldness. I admired the effect, but despite several attempts, I couldn't get the knack of it. I had a lot of support. Raymond was extremely helpful. My family, church, and friends stood by me, praying for me. I put together a private group of Facebook members who were praying for me, and I posted updates on things progressed. Being a writer, I am a person of words, but I find it hard to convey how important this support from family and friends was to me. These wonderful people not only encouraged me with their posts and messages, but I am sure their petitions on my behalf were heard in heaven. Some days, especially as the cancer grew, I wasn't up to the visit or even talking on the phone, but I could read messages on my iPod. From bad to worse. The tumors continued to grow and I began to decline. At that time, I was still being treated as an outpatient and living at home. It was my habit to walk every morning and evening in our beautiful rural community in Texas Hill Country. A day came when I had trouble breathing on my morning walk, so I was put on oxygen 24/7 that worked for a while but not for long. I was soon gasping for breath, even with the oxygen. I called my doctor and she offered immediate surgery, a dangerous surgery on my lungs with no guarantee. Raymond and I talked it over. Our understanding was that all that could be accomplished would be a short, excruciatingly painful extension of my life. We prayed and took time to seek and know God's will. The result was that we had peace to not have the offered surgery. We understood that others may have made a different choice, but that was not ours. Because I was exhausted and struggling to breathe, I stayed in bed and concentrated on taking one breath at a time. That's all I could do. That and pray silently. Talking took too much effort. I can't say I prayed beautiful prayers or made strong, faith-filled declarations. All I had strength for was to remind myself and the Lord of the angel's words that I would live and not die, and that I would declare his glory. Good news! Tumors gone! Something wonderful happened. As the days passed, I became aware that the external tumors under my right arm were shrinking. They had been very large and extremely uncomfortable, making it difficult to sleep. Now every morning I could see they were becoming smaller, and in 3 weeks they were entirely gone, all gone. Shortly after, I went in to see my oncologist and showed her my perfectly smooth underarm, now absent tumors, and asked her, "Have you ever seen anything like this?" And she said no. The nurse was quick to proclaim, Chapter 8, "You got a miracle." Treatment reaction. I wish I could say that was the end of my troubles and that I returned to a normal, healthy life, enjoying the company of my family and friends and the view from my back porch. However, that didn't happen. I had a severe reaction to Yervoy. It acted as a host to an unusual and extreme case of ulcerative colitis. We didn't know at first that that was the problem. I became so nauseous I couldn't retain any food or drink. Various treatments were tried, but nothing helped. In that state, I quickly lost over 50 pounds. On my best day, I could only nibble on 1 or 2 boiled eggs throughout the day. I considered myself well off if I could get any of that down. Things got worse instead of better. I collapsed and was hospitalized. Our son Scott was quick to come home. He and his wife Kelly both work in healthcare and were very helpful and supportive. Our daughter Mary stayed in touch by phone. She had come for a visit earlier. At first, no one knew what was wrong with me. A gastroenterologist was called in who was quick to recognize the source of problem and began proper treatment. I was in the hospital for a month for the first time I was admitted, and went back and forth between there and a nursing home several times. Raymond spent part of every day with me. When I first went to the nursing home, Raymond and both our sons were with me. Scott was a good resource since he had worked in a nursing home, and so was Christopher, since he was a lawyer. For my peace of mind, I asked him to look over the contract Raymond and I had signed before I was admitted. Christopher's wife, Jenny, didn't come in person, but she stood with me in prayer, as did Scott's wife. Christopher's wife, Jenny, didn't come in person, but she stood with me in prayer, as did Scott's wife, Kelly, our church, neighbors, and friends. I was surrounded by strength. It was encouraging. Street clothes were required at the nursing home, and mine didn't fit because of the extreme weight loss. Christopher solved the problem by buying me a new wardrobe. He was a good shopper and thoughtful enough to also buy me a clothes hamper. I went to the nursing home grateful and well-equipped. For most of the time in the hospital, I was fed intravenously while in bed in a hospital gown. Before being transferred to the nursing home, I was switched to ordering from the menu while still in bed. Mostly I ordered boosts and a milkshake. I no longer cared for real food. At the nursing home, it was a shock to be awakened at an early hour, dressed, and wheeled into the dining room where I was expected to eat real food, be upright, and sociable. I was no longer the morning person I had once been. I still haven't regained that, although I do enjoy real food now. Time passed slowly. Typically, when confused, I was shuttled back and forth between the hospital and nursing home for 3 months. I was a patient who wasn't very patient. I missed my valley home and the beauty of the hills that surrounded us, the deer that came at night, our little lake, the ducks, and the occasional swan or two. One year we had several swans. No place like home. The third time I was scheduled to go back to the nursing home from the hospital, Raymond, who had spent time with me every day, spoke up and said he thought he could provide better care and he wanted to take me home. We were told I would not be released from the hospital to go home unless I could walk unassisted, something I had not done for 3 months. The day before my hope for release, a physical therapist came in and worked with me. I amazed myself by being able to walk under his direction up and down stairs. My performance wouldn't have earned any rewards for style. I did it shakily, but I did it. And the therapist signed off for me to go home. Once home, my strength began to return. Sometime afterward, I went to see the gastroenterologist who had diagnosed ulcerative colitis at the hospital for a follow-up exam. After checking me out in his office, he said, "When I first saw you, I said to myself, this person is dying." Once again, God chose life for me. 6 years later, after 1 year of clear scans, my oncologist told me, "You would be dead now, except you got a miracle." She continued to do routine scans for 3.5 years, and nothing unusual showed up. Now at 6 years out from cancer, I am only going in for a physical checkup and blood work once a year. Yeah, God. Earlier, when I looked up the scripture the angel spoke to me, I found the phrase, "Declare the glory of God" from Psalms 118 is sometimes interpreted as "publish the glory of God." Since I am retired from a career in publishing, it seemed a natural thing to do, and is why you are reading How God Built Faith. Many people rallied around me to pray, including family, friends, past pastors, church intercessors, Facebook friends, and healing room ministers. Some spoke into my life in ways that brought faith, and I am thankful to them all. since Hebrews 11:6 tells us that it is impossible to please God without faith. I am grateful to have the faith builders in my life. Following is a testimony from my daughter-in-law Jenny about how God built her faith as she stood with me for my healing. The Mary she refers to is my daughter, and Chris is my son, Jenny's husband. I want to share what God did to maintain faith for your healing even when there were no outright signs of healing taking place. On December 29th, 2010, after you got your PET scan results, I called my friend Jennifer Pitts to pray with her on the phone. The most powerful thing we were both left with was, "We will believe the report of the Lord." After the call, I sat down and read my Bible. I was reading in Amos. I had an impression of Mary with child, and I felt God say that sign of your daughter Mary with child would be a sign of your healing. I wrote it in my journal, and I showed it only with Jennifer. I wasn't sure if it was my own hope or God speaking. Months later, on June 5th, 2011, Mary sent word she was pregnant. I then jumped up and shared with Chris what I had heard and had been holding on to for 6 months. That was before there was any sign that the tumors were shrinking. Much to the contrary, you were struggling increasingly to breathe even though on oxygen. That sign was enough for me. Jennifer and I continued to pray in faith for your healing, bringing before God the things He had already said and shown to you and to us. 6 weeks later, you shared that the tumors had begun to shrink, and of course that was before the second part of the battle for your life beginning. Before me, that sign from God was unmistakable and gave me great conviction that your healing was coming. It helped me pray in faith through the darkest days, with a knowing that I can't explain other than a gift of faith. I can't even describe the joy that rose up when you shared about the tumors shrinking. Your battle was still far from over, but at that point I had seen enough and heard enough that the enemy's taunts to cause unbelief would not do it again, God. So, what can I say in conclusion? I'm home, I'm alive, I'm cancer-free. Tests have decisively shown and continue to confirm 5 years later that I have absolutely no signs of cancer. Doctors have declared me a walking miracle, and my oncologist doesn't want to see me for a year. How affirming. Impact Christian Fellowship. I am happy to be able to attend my church again. Our elders, pastors, intercessors, and friends at Impact encouraged us, prayed many prayers for us, and gave Raymond and I needed spiritual and emotional support during our journey to a miracle. My pastor says, giving a testimony means, do it again, God. So my hope and prayer is this: do for others, Lord, that Chapter you have 11, done for me. Do it again, God. So, what can I say in conclusion? I'm home, I'm alive, I'm cancer-free. Tests have decisively shown and continue to confirm 5 years later that I have absolutely no signs of cancer. Doctors have declared me a walking miracle, and my oncologist doesn't want to see me for a year. How affirming. Impact Christian Fellowship. I am happy to be able to attend my church again. Our elders, pastors, intercessors, and friends at Impact encouraged us, prayed many prayers for us, and gave Raymond and I needed spiritual and emotional support during our journey to a miracle. My pastor says, giving a testimony means, do it again, God. So my hope and prayer is this: do for others, Lord, that you have done for me. Raymond's story. This picture was taken on our 25th wedding anniversary. It is the last professional picture we made. We are at 53 years married now and counting. I wish we had made one on our 50th, but we were still dealing with the aftermath of chemo. In 2010, our lives were changed forever when Janelle was diagnosed with metastasized melanoma. It was a very sad and scary time, so we began to pray as we had never prayed before. One day while she was praying, Janelle was told that she would live and not die. This was wonderful news that gave us faith to believe for a miracle. She was operated on twice. The melanoma came back with a vengeance. Eventually, it was in her liver, lungs, and even her bones. But the worst thing was that it filled up her lungs. At that point, she had had to have constant oxygen in order to breathe. Family, neighbors, and friends rallied around us to pray and help. We also received a lot of support and encouragement from our local church and prayer groups. Janelle had a private group on Facebook made up of Christian friends from all over the U.S. and one in Canada. Many were from churches we had attended in Houston and kept in touch with. Some were cyber friends Janelle had known for a long time, even before Facebook. In addition to praying, some of these groups spoke words of faith and encouragement to us that were in agreement with what the Lord had told Janelle, that she would live and not die. Redding, California. In the spring of 2011, we packed up and headed to Redding, California, and to Bethel Church. On the way, we stopped and visited with our son Christopher, his wife Jenny, and their children near Los Angeles. We received much prayer from them and from their friend Jennifer Pitts and her family. The atmosphere at Bethel was faith-building, and many good things happened there, but no healing was evident. From Redding, we went to visit Janelle's sister Carolyn and her husband Alan on the Pacific Coast in Oregon and received prayers from them. We also prayed for them according to their needs. On our return trip, we stopped in Los Angeles to visit and pray again with Chris and Jenny. We headed back to our home in Texas Hill Country, carrying many prayers and good wishes with us. When we got back, Janelle's doctor informed us that a new treatment for melanoma called Yervoy was available. The cost was $600,000. We were relieved to discover that Medicare would cover it. Yervoy sounded promising, and we were excited that it was available. Tumors disappeared. After a couple months, the tumors under her right arm began to disappear. She had a PET scan that showed no cancer anywhere. I thought, boy, that Yervoy is great. We visited the doctor and showed her the tumors were gone from Janelle's underarm area. She agreed that she had never seen anything like that. Later she said it wasn't Yervoy, that it was a miracle. Since she had been having trial groups with Yervoy for several years before it was released to the general public, we knew she was qualified to make the judgment. What great news! But soon Janelle could not keep anything down when she tried to eat. I took her to the emergency room a few times, but nothing changed. In that condition, she lost 60 pounds and had to be hospitalized. She then spent time in a nursing home. Although we have friends who enjoy their stay there, her experience was not good. Finally, I said, no more nursing home. I can take better care of her at home. She was able to rest better and to eat more at home. We traveled to Kansas City to see our 8th grandchild, Michael, just after his birth, and stayed there a couple months. After getting home, Janelle began having trouble keeping food down again and was put back in the hospital for 10 days. Eventually, she gained back her strength and weight. We are so very thankful for the healing of melanoma, and at the same time, Janelle still needs restoration from the complications of chemo. But thank God she is alive.
This has been
and is
Healed of Cancer,
cancer-free.
Journey to a Miracle, written by Janelle Price, narrated by Ashley Strand. Copyright 2017 by Janelle Price. Production copyright 2018 by Janelle Price.